Hi friends, how much would you sacrifice for your family? It was my first day as a fisherman, and I had never known anything about fishing. But I lost my job at the bank, and in this economy, you can't really be picky. I had worked all my life as a banker, dealing with loans, mortgages, and people borrowing ridiculous amounts of money that they could never pay back. So, when I saw the ad offering an obscene amount of money for a fishing gig, I convinced myself that a change would be welcome. Who was I kidding? The money was the real draw. A bit of fresh air, some physical work, and enough food for my family. How hard could it be? When I arrived at the docks, the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a pale light over the water. I was greeted by two men on the deck, rough-looking guys who had clearly spent most of their lives at sea. "You guys the new rookies?" one of them asked, his voice gruff but not unfriendly. "I'll get the captain." A few moments later, Captain Dave appeared. He was tall and tough, with a weathered face that spoke of decades spent battling the elements. For a man in his 50s, he was still incredibly strong and imposing. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked, looking between me and the other new guy, Mike. "These waters are dangerous. A lot of people get lost at sea." Mike and I exchanged glances. We both nodded. We needed the money. "All right," Captain Dave said, his voice serious. "But before we sail, there are some rules you need to follow if you want to make it back safe. The place we're going to fish is full of things you can't even imagine." He handed us a list, and as we read through it, a chill ran down my spine. After dusk, no lights on deck. Under any circumstances, you are not allowed to use your phone, smoke, or do anything that can cause a light. No swimming. Nobody is allowed in the water at any time. For the next 3 days and nights, you will stay on the boat only. If you hear any noise or footsteps from above deck at night, do not investigate. Just lock your door, and you'll be fine. If you see faces in the water, people who look like they need help, don't help them. Don't reach out your hand, don't talk to them, just walk away. It's probably just the heat playing tricks on you. There are no other people where we're going. You will be given noise-canceling headphones. Whenever you hear singing, humming, or any sort of music, put on your headphones immediately. This is very important, even when you sleep. Captain Dave's eyes were hard as he spoke. It might not make sense to you now, but those rules are to be followed, always. Mike and I nodded again, our confidence starting to waver. But we had already agreed to this, and the money was too good to pass up. The first day was just typical work, hauling nets, sorting fish. The heat was intense, and the physical demand was more than I had expected. By dusk, I was exhausted. As we prepared to head below deck to rest, I noticed Captain Dave placing a large bowl of fish on the deck. It looked like an offering or something. It struck me as odd, but I didn't say anything. That night, I decided not to wear the headphones. It all seemed a bit silly. But in the middle of the night, I heard noises from above. It sounded like something was being dragged across the deck, followed by faint growling. I remembered the rules, quickly put on my headphones, and forced myself to sleep. The next morning, I wasn't the first to wake up. When I got to the deck, some of the older guys were cleaning off a strange, slimy residue. Nobody explained what it was, and I was too new to ask. The day went by as normal, the heat beating down on us as we caught more fish than I'd ever seen. By dusk, Captain Dave told us to head below deck again, looking more relieved than the day before. As I was going downstairs, I heard a faint voice calling for help from the water. My heart raced. I thought maybe one of the crew had fallen overboard, so I rushed to see who it was. When I looked over the edge, I saw what appeared to be a face just below the surface, with a hand stretched out toward me. I was about to reach out when Captain Dave's voice cut through the fog in my mind. "It's been a long day in the sun. Remember the rules and get some rest." I stepped back, convincing myself it was just my imagination. As I lay in bed that night, my body aching from the day's work, I couldn't stop thinking about that face. I eventually drifted into a restless sleep, only to be woken by a strange melody. It was haunting, beautiful, and I found myself unable to resist it. I got out of bed, unlocked my door, and was halfway up the stairs when I realized what was happening. I snapped out of it just in time to see Mike's feet disappearing up to the deck. My heart froze. I grabbed my headphones and followed him, desperate to stop whatever was happening. When I reached the deck, I saw him standing at the edge, staring into the water. Dark, scaly hands with claws reached up from the depths, trying to climb onto the ship. Mike didn't seem to notice, stepping closer to the edge as if in a trance. Before I could move, one of the creatures, half human, half fish, wrapped its arms around him and pulled him into the water. The others followed, dragging him down into the dark abyss. I stood there, paralyzed with fear, unable to comprehend what I had just witnessed. I ran to wake the captain, but he wasn't sleeping. He looked at me with a firm expression and said, "Go back to bed." The next morning, the crew acted as if nothing had happened. When I tried to ask about Mike, they all said he had jumped into the water, taking his own life. I was furious and told them what I had seen. Captain Dave silenced me with a glare. "That's what happens when you don't follow the rules," he said coldly. "If you're so concerned, why don't you jump in the water and look for him?" He was right. After what I had seen, I didn't want to get anywhere near the water. So, we went about our day in silence, everyone too afraid to talk about the night to come. By dusk, Captain Dave nodded at us, signaling that the day's work was done. I was exhausted, but I forced myself to stay alert. I put on my headphones and lay in bed, trying to block out the fear gnawing at my insides. Sometime in the night, I felt the ship lurch, as if something had hit us. I jumped out of bed, opened my door, and saw the rest of the crew in the hallway, their faces pale with fear. We all took off our headphones, and that's when we heard it, Mike's voice, calling for help. Then, another voice joined in, and another. They all asked why we had abandoned them, why we didn't help them. Captain Dave appeared, his voice cutting through the rising panic. "Put your headphones on and follow me to my room if you want to see the morning." We did as he said, huddling together in the cramped quarters. A storm began to rage outside, and Captain Dave finally told us it was safe to remove our headphones. "The creatures don't attack during storms," he said, his voice grim. I pressed him for answers, but all he could tell me was that he had been fishing these waters for over 20 years, and as long as you made the offering and followed the rules, nothing bad would happen. As the first light of dawn broke, we set sail for shore. The relief among the crew was palpable. When we reached the port, Captain Dave paid me, his expression unreadable. "I'll call the police about Mike," he said, turning away without another word. As I walked home, I counted the money. It was more than I used to make in a month. But could I do this again? Could I go back to that boat, knowing what was out there in the water, waiting? I didn't have an answer. The only thing I knew for sure was that in this economy, I might not have a choice.